fits into touch screen as well, so you don't get that on Linux or Mac. So as you've noticed, I'm a Windows user, so please don't hold it against me. Someone has to be. So I'm going to give a brief talk on Jenkins 2.0 and what the future holds for 3.0. If you want to tweet me any questions afterwards, if you don't get a chance to follow me after the talk or in the Q&A session, at James Tylo, or email me, janelord@cloudbees.com. So this probably will be, if I've got my timing correct, relatively quick, because I tend to find that these sessions work slightly better when there's a bit more Q&A. So hopefully I've timed it right, but if not, feel free to ask me questions as I go through. There's also the Q&A at the end. So myself, I'm a software engineer. Wouldn't necessarily class myself as a DevOps guy. I'm a software engineer at heart. However, I was always the guy that looked after the lab, scrounging all the old equipment to put together to build CI servers, so that when someone checked in code on my team, and there was the two of us, so it was a team of two. He worked in the morning. I'm not a morning person, I'm an afternoon person. He'd check in his code at the end of the day. I'd come in to merge my code at the end of the day, and I'd find there was merge conflicts. I'd check out his code. It would all be broken. So that's why well, not a merge conflict, but he'd have forgotten to check in files. So that's when I started to get involved with Jenkins, which was about 9 years ago, a little more than 9 years ago, nearly 10 years, so right at the infancy. And that came about because I tried to set up cruise control, spent a week bashing my head against a brick wall and gave up. And I got started with Jenkins in 20 minutes. Wow. So I've been involved with Jenkins as an administrator of several instances, a plugin developer, and a user. So I'm guessing nobody here does not know what Jenkins is. Good. There's the blurb. It's an automation server. It used to be called the continuous integration server, but really now it's just about automating whatever you want. It doesn't need to be about integrating. It doesn't even need to be about continuous deployment. It could be to turn the kettle on every morning at 9 o'clock if you wanted. So I'm going to cover why 2.0 existed, or why it exists, what is in 2.0, the road beyond. So in 1.0, I think most of you probably know how to get it by now. If not, there's some lovely instructions that you can cut and paste. And that will get you a Jenkins instance up and running in however long it takes to download the WAR. So you run that, and there you go. Then what? You're presented with the screen. Several developers will probably have this running under their desk, and that will be as far as they get after doing create new jobs, which will allow anyone under the sun to run anything on their box, because they can connect to it and create a job that will run as the Jenkins user. So that was one thing we wanted to address. Security by default. It's no longer 10 years ago where these are kind of in little walled gardens in labs that are locked down that people can't get to. People spin up Jenkins in AWS, public-facing internet. It had a handful of helpful plugins pre-installed. So 10 years ago, CVS was very commonplace. And it was bundled 10 years ago, and it was bundled up until about 3 weeks ago as well, because, well, we've always bundled it, so, you know, we can't unbundle it. Does anyone use CVS here? No one still. There are still people that use it, you'd be amazed. So there's the plugins there that were no longer, a lot of them aren't really relevant. And even if they are relevant, Maven isn't really relevant to a .NET shop. So they're kind of relevant if they're relevant to you, but not really relevant because you'd probably be doing something other than Java, which is where this all started out. Obviously as well, there's no Git plugin by default. So once you've kind of configured your instance and done something, you would want to build and release some software. And as this is DevOps, it's not just build it and create a WAR file and then grab it off and email it to someone. You would have a pipeline. So you would create some jobs, plethora of jobs. You'd create triggers. So you'd have downstream triggers. So you'd have your code commit job. When your code commit job would finish, that would trigger the smoke tests. When the smoke test job would finish, that would probably trigger your user acceptance test, which take longer, which would then trigger your deploy to QA, which would then trigger your deploy to, which would then and roll on, roll on. And easy to set up. So just a little field. Don't know if you can see that, but build other projects to build. And generally, you only want to build it if the build is stable. So that would be the build job. This would be the test job. So the test job, once it's passed, would build the deploy job. And you can see that then realized in the downstream projects in the user interface. So this is the build job, triggering has downstream of test. Test has an upstream of build and a downstream of deploy, which looks a little bit like that. So when you come and look at it, you go, well, what is that? And nobody has just a build, test, and deploy. Maybe you do, actually. But certainly, one of the large pipelines I saw at Yahoo had a chain of about 230 jobs all linked together. And they put it all up on a graph, and it was kind of, it would fill the screen, and you wouldn't be able to read what all the text was on the various bits because it's not linear. You have splits and joins and waits. So your user acceptance tests, you might have enough of them that they take 12 hours to run if you run them all. So you don't run them all, you run 12 sets of a 12th of them, so it takes an hour to run. Or you run a 60th of them on 60 machines, so you can get your feedback a lot quicker. So easy peasy. It's all the configurations you could ever want and more. It was consistent for a decade, and rather sneakily, I will say it's low maintenance. And it's low maintenance because once you set it up, if you want to insert a new job somewhere in those 120 jobs of the pipeline you've got, it's an absolute nightmare. So it's low maintenance because you set it and you forget it. The one guy set it up, he knows how it's all set up. So you set it, you forget it, you don't touch it, it works. So that was one of the big things in 1.x that we needed to address. As pipelines are becoming more and more prevalent, that wasn't really acceptable anymore. Security by default, another one, and it was still pretty much the same user interface that has been there for the past 10 years. So, Jenkins 2.0. We have pipeline as code front and center, a improved out-of-the-box user experience, and some user interface improvements. So I'll come on to pipeline as code first. So what we've done, how many of you here have used the workflow plugin in Jenkins? A handful. Okay. How many of you have upgraded that workflow plugin to the pipeline plugin after the rename? Okay. So in Jenkins 1, there was the workflow plugin. That got rebranded at the start of the year to the pipeline plugin. It is a new type of job in Jenkins. It's basically a DSL. And you can extend the DSL with your own steps. It's based on Groovy, so you've got all the control structures that you have in Groovy. So you can do 4 iterations over a map, and various different things like that. And it allows you to codify implicit series of stages in a Jenkins file. You can do, without using a Jenkins file, you can enter all this in the UI. But the real thing here is you store this in a file in the source repository along with your code. One of the other things that was added around the time of 2.0 as well is repository auto-scanning. So if you use GitHub or Gerrit, and you create a pipeline from the specific type, it will automatically find your branches. So when you're using Gerrit, if you point at the Gerrit repo and someone does a pull request, not pull request because that's wrong, there's a new change set, you will get a new, almost like a job listed for that change set that will show all the builds for all of that change set. So when someone does patch set 1, patch set 2, patch set 3, you'll still see all of the history, and that will be separate from your main jobs history and separate from all the other change set histories. Change set for pull request for those that use GitHub, or anything else that uses the pull request model. So what does it look like? So this is, as I said, it is Groovy-ish DSL. There are a certain number of functions that are defined out of the box. So who doesn't use Jenkins? Who uses something other than Jenkins? Right, okay. For the benefit of the people that don't use Jenkins, the master-slave architecture in Jenkins, so there's a master which is in control of telling everyone what to do, and there are, for those of you who've been using 1.x slaves, they've now been rebinded agents because people in America didn't like the terminology. So we have the master and agents. So an agent will have a certain number of executors, and an executor can take a unit of work. So the master will just dole out the work to these executors, and the executors belong to the agents, and the agents have labels. So in this case, we're saying we want a node, which is give me an agent with the Docker label. So you set up your slaves with labels. So Red Hat or Windows, if they've got Docker on, you might add Docker. So in this example, that will get me something with Docker on. The checkout keyword is, again, a first-class citizen. You can pass it full parameters for a Git URL, a subversion URL, and authentication to use. In this case, we're just using the keyword SCM. So that is, I want the version of code that triggered this build. So if you are using one of the job types that I mentioned earlier that will auto-create the jobs for new branches, when someone commits, you don't need to redo a load of stuff, it's just check out SCM, and that will get the version for the patch set or the pull request. It's useful for when you want to check out the code multiple times and kind of maybe run it once on, compile it and test it on Windows, compile and test it on Linux. So otherwise you have to jump through some hoops, which you can do, which is what the next step should kind of show you. So because we're on a Docker node, you can even comment this, so there's comments there. We have a shell step. So in this case, the shell step is just going to run a git command to get the git commit of what we're going to be building. It echoes that to a file, which then gets read in using the read file command, and Groovy at the end takes 6, which is just give me the first 6 characters. So one thing that's important here, unlike Jenkins jobs, if you shut down your Jenkins master when your Jenkins job is running, unlike freestyle jobs when you shut down Jenkins, when Jenkins come back up, all those freestyle jobs that we're building will have failed or be aborted. For workflow, it will automatically come back up and know where it was at that point and continue running from there. If you've got this shell command is running all your user acceptance tests, which takes 6 hours, and it's 1 hour in, it'll come back up, it'll go, oh, I started that, has it finished? It'll go and check, has it finished? If it hasn't finished, it'll just still resume and wait for it to finish. It won't start it again, it'll just pick up from where it left off. And so we also have here a stage, which I'll come on to later for those who haven't seen, which is just a way of visualizing stages of your pipeline. Generally, a pipeline will have a linear flow through some form of building code, doing some form of testing, doing some form of more testing, a bit more testing, even more testing, and some deployment. So you can just label them however you want. It is free text. So we have the build here, and we're running Docker build, which will here inside the checkout. If we've got a Docker file, or if we don't have a Docker file, that will flag up. But it will take that Docker file and create a Docker image from it and tag it with Jenkins infra find and the tag of build and then the short commit ID, which we got from the git commit earlier. So that's the first class system, Docker. Once we've got that, we will have an image. We go into the deploy stage and just image push. That will push that up to the repository. So if you
just a quick one.
Yeah.
If SHA-1 is going to be deprecated next month, is that going to have an impact on lots of code that's in there?
Which bit?
Just the use of it. I mean, for web browsers it's certainly great, but what's going to be the impact generally? I mean, it's just a thought really. On
Git or on the pipeline?
It's generally considered to be deprecated. And what would the impact be on all these hidden bits?
Can't hear anything.
So the question was, given that SHA-1 is deprecated, what's the impact going to be on everything that uses it? Git, everything is it SHA-1 or is it SHA-256 in Git?
SHA-1.
It's SHA-1. So I honestly don't know a Git, but it's so baked into the Git protocol, I'd be surprised if it didn't still work.
It'll hang around, I accept that, but for browsers and things, it's going to start breaking.
Isn't that deprecated for security purposes?
Well, Microsoft have a history of changing the way logs and things work, but I mean, it won't affect the log.
Well, the Git command here is running the native Git command, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, this is one of the chat database, yeah? Okay.
Yeah. So there is a lot more than I've shown in there. There is a full DSL reference that you can obtain. When you create a pipeline job, you can go to the pipeline DSL reference, which is one of the help boxes. I'm not even going to attempt to go through the hundreds of keywords. There is a GDSL for IntelliJ users. And you can also have a global library inside Jenkins, which is a shared repository of functions for your pipelines. So say you always want to deploy in a certain manner and you want to deploy wars, you can have deploy war, which takes a path to a war as an argument and then works out how to deploy it to your AWS, so you can abstract all that away from your developers. Or ops teams, or DevOps teams, or however you want to spin it. So the stages, as I was saying, the colours unfortunately are a little bit washed out here. They are green, honest, trust me. So you can see all the builds coming up and the stages that they're in. These are all green, and you've got the times going across, so you can see that the deploy is the dominating factor in your build, or in your pipeline. Hopefully the next one, you can just about make out the red. Because the world isn't all green, you always have a bit of failure. If you don't have failure, your tests aren't correct. So slightly more real worldy, some failures, some passes, and it gives you an overall picture of which build, which commit is where in your pipeline. And this is directly from the job, inbuilt in the job. This was, prior to a month ago or a month and a half ago, proprietary commercial. We have open sourced it, and it is available to open source Jenkins users as well as our customers. I'm not going to say any more about our proprietary stuff because this is not the thing for it. But So the out-of-the-box UX, as I said, your developers, so I have got my timing a bit wrong. So your developers would have just spun this up on their desk because they wanted something and your central infrastructure was too slow to create a new Jenkins, and they'd have something completely insecure there. At least now, when you get started, you get prompted with a kind of a getting started wizard. The first thing that happens is there's a password printed to the logs. The second thing is, please enter the password. If you don't know where it is, go and have a look in this log file. So it's not, you can't just completely own someone's desktop just because they've started up Jenkins for the first time somewhere, or do your server or anything else. There's also the plugin selection, so recommended plugins or customize your plugins. You can start up Jenkins now with no plugins installed and get something completely and utterly useless because it won't do anything, won't know how to build a job, it will be nothing, but you can choose the plugins that you want. We have the recommended set, which is the pipeline, Git, Subversion, and Mailer, because people like to send mail, JUnit, credentials. We have some more user interface improvements, so it's, I'm not going to say it's a tabbed interface because it's not, but this is the freestyle kind of job which has been made over. So you've got the tabs for, not tabs, your sections, build environment, build triggers, and that will just scroll you down to the various areas, and you've got bars to highlight what bits belong to what sections. Whereas before you had checkboxes and you weren't sure, does this belong with that bit or does it belong with something else? There is a new item page, so rather than having a big long list of 30, 40 job types and having to select one, it will be grouped by category if you have enough things for the categories, and it's a bit more graphical. I've said, consistent terminology, so I've already mentioned there are no slaves anymore, only agents.
And nodes.
Sorry?
And nodes.
Yeah, unfortunately there are nodes. Yes. And so it is a drop-in replacement for 1.x. Apart from, we now require a servlet 3.0 or higher container. So if you're running on Tomcat 7, 6, you will need to upgrade. If you're using the embedded Jetty container, everything's done for you. That allows us to do further improvements to the UI later on, such as server push. So, quick bit through the retrospective. When we started discussions on 2.0, it was like, well, everything came out of the woodwork. Because binary compatibility has been king, we've not been able to make changes to big things, and we haven't been able to change the user interface because it's baked into so many plugins. So what I'm going to tell you now is provisional, tentative, subject to change, might not even happen, might do. But the themes we're going to address in the future: more continuous delivery, more scalability and availability, and more user experience. So coming for the future, to be able to model application and environments within Jenkins, not just builds. So let Jenkins know what happens with them when. So what is deployed where in which environment, what changes have gone into that environment in the last 10 minutes or 2 hours, and let what an application is and environment is be loosely defined so you can define it for your needs. I've mentioned that. Storage and availability, I've got a minute. Right. Configuration, build records, logs, fingerprints, artifacts. Pretty much everything lives on the Jenkins master disk at the moment, which means that as you grow, you want to have nice fast disks, and it becomes a point of contention. So we want to get away from that. There's been talk of back-end pluggability, so bring your own data back-end, potentially moving to a database. Everything's up in the air being discussed. So the availability, clustering, kind of try and break the monolithic master to to allow better availability, try and reduce and remove the need for hard downtime to upgrade plugins. I'm not so sure on the multi-tenancy there really. So kind of on the user experience front, there's a hashtag. If you search for Blue Ocean or it's a big Blue Ocean, you'll get drip feeds of some information. That works currently internal CloudBees, but we're looking to open source it. If we haven't done it already, doing it soon as a new UI on top of Jenkins. So Jenkins is really made of people that contribute. So we are always looking for people to help participate. Either that's helping out writing core plugins. We always need better documentation. You can never have too much documentation. So if anyone loves writing documentation, we'd love to have contributions. Events, and possibly more of interest to you guys here, infrastructure. We have three guys that run the Jenkins CI org and Jenkins IO infrastructure. So that's the Jira, Confluence, all of that stuff. So any help there, I'm sure they would love to have some help. There's some links to try out Jenkins 2.0. Email address and hashtag Jenkins on Freenode IRC. If you're going to try it, so 2.0 is out now. You're probably all using Jenkins for your main job. I would never recommend running a weekly release for something that is mission critical in your infrastructure. So the long-term support release will be around in June-ish. Check the stable changelog for more information on when that is. It will be updated. Those of you that are running Jenkins, there will be a big security fix coming tomorrow or tonight. You will want to upgrade tomorrow.
Or one or two, or both.
For everything. So for all of the lines that CloudBees support and the latest and greatest and the LTS.
Okay, with that, James, thank you. We've got a short time. Couple of questions,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy. Config.xml and views finally in version control.
So config.xml would be replaced by Jenkins file if you're using pipelines. The views, no, not yet.
Yes.
It depends what you're using the views for. Some of that might be replaced by the state
build
view.
monitors. Everybody wants their own build monitor, so we end up with 25 of them.
So if that's what you want, then if you migrate to the pipeline, then you've got that in the stage view.
What's the deal with Jenkins.io and Jenkins CI.org, which will wants to proceed the other?
Jenkins.io is the new one that will be all the new documentation and everything will move over there eventually. It was purely people saw the CI and thought, oh, Jenkins only does continuous integration, boo-hoo. So it was a marketing thing.
Okay, just time for one more.
Yeah. Does the pipeline have the same configuration like the Jenkins job builder as code? Because I really hate to create the jobs manually in the interface.
I don't follow, sorry, but
So basically, does the pipeline plugin has the same configuration system like the Jenkins job builder? Basically, you can build from a script.
Depending on how you set it up. So one of the CloudBees products is, I think it might even be an open source one, repository scanning for GitHub. So if you configure, you create a folder and say, I'm using GitHub, this is my GitHub URL and I want this organization. It will trawl all of the repositories in that organization and look for repositories that have a Jenkins file and then create jobs for those branches. So in some respects, no, because you've got your Jenkins file and you just check that into source control. So you don't need to go and create that job apart from the repository scanning. If you just want individual pipelines, then there is some configuration to do, but you can do that also with job DSL. So you can use job DSL to create your pipeline to load your Jenkins file from source control.
Okay. Good stuff. James, thank you very much.